Well, good morning and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us on this beautiful day. My name is Julie Shields-Rutina, and I am the Senior Director of College Planning, Education, and Training at MEFA. And I'm so glad you're joining us on this MEFA Institute webinar. And the topic this morning is Massachusetts State Financial Aid. And we have the person, we have Dr. Clantha McCurdy, who is the Senior Deputy Commissioner of Access and Student Financial Assistance. And she's at the Office of Student Financial Aid, part of the Department of Higher Education. And we're going to talk all about the new, financial aid programs. I guess I won't give it away, but you already know there's a lot of good news here. So it's exciting. Before we start, I will just give some logistics. So if you have a question, put it into the Q&A, and we'll try to get to your questions. There's a lot of content, but any burning question you can put there as well. And if you need to leave, we're recording this, so we will be sending you the recording and the slides tomorrow. And lastly, just a reminder that the MEFA Institute has so many lessons on so many topics. And when you participate, then you can receive professional development points. And so in the follow-up, you'll be able to see how it's easy to do that. So with that, I will turn it over to you, Clantha.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. And it's nice to be with you today. Happy Thursday. I'm looking forward to spending the next hour with you as we preview the financial aid programs. I think this is an excellent time to connect with you, given the FAFSA completion season that will be shortly underway, and would like to share information with you to help your students make good choices for state financial aid or just for their college career path and where they might end up going. These are some very exciting times at the Department of Higher Education with financial aid. So I'm looking forward to that. Just to start out, we have always focused on access and affordability with our state financial aid programs. We've not always had sufficient resources to achieve the levels that we want, but it's everything that we do with our financial aid policy is always focused on access and affordability. And we've had a number of things going on within the past 3 years, actually, as you look at the world of state financial aid for Massachusetts. As we look at access and affordability, we are looking at providing financial aid programs, access to financial aid. We're going to talk a little bit about the free community college program and free tuition and fees at our other four-year institutions. As we review access, we are focused on removing barriers, and we introduced the tuition equity policy to you last year. We'll highlight that a little bit today. And then we have also devoted many resources to outreach to students outside of our typical college age group, the 18 to 22-year-old, looking at adult learners for many programs that are workforce related, but specifically the Mass Reconnect program, which basically kicked off the free community college this past year. So this is the way we've sort of lined up our financial aid policy and the programs that might come under the policy and how we hope to help students and their families maneuver through their college career. So with access, one of the things that I wanted to point out this morning is removing barriers through the tuition equity law, which we introduced, had a few workshops last year, and certainly we'll have more this year coming up that we've had people from our legal team who can explain this law a whole lot better than me, but we want to make sure that that word is out there. And we are partnering with many stakeholders who have been working with the population that we are hoping to reach with the tuition equity law. So when Massachusetts passed that this past year, it opened up an opportunity for undocumented students to take advantage of in-state tuition, certainly, and also to benefit from state financial aid. And I have a little bit of information here about the MASFA application. But in essence, the tuition equity law carves a pathway for in-state tuition and state financial aid for non-U.S. citizens, including undocumented students. The eligibility, students are required to have attended a Massachusetts high school for at least 3 academic years. They don't have to necessarily be consecutive years. And as we deploy this policy, we are holding to 3 years, but a student might not complete the full year. So there's a little flexibility there. And if you have questions about that, you could certainly reach out to our agency. But we look for the student who have earned either a high school diploma or the equivalent and meeting one of the documentation requirements as far as their citizenship status. And again, these students are allowed in-state tuition, which wasn't possible before this past academic year, 23-24, and certainly eligibility for state financial aid. So any of the programs that we discussed this morning, if a student is undocumented and has that documentation on file at their institution, they could benefit from any of those programs so long as they meet the eligibility criteria. And what this program developed for us or brought along, this equity law was the creation of a Massachusetts application for state financial aid. We call it the MASFA because, as you know, our undocumented students are unable to get a complete analysis from a FAFSA. They can submit it, but it will reject with incomplete information. So instead of saying they cannot complete the FAFSA will not yield the results that they need. So we invite these students to complete the MASFA application. It became available this past year. And as we roll out financial aid applications for this year, we certainly will have this one available. We launched that MASFA application in January of 2024. And at that point, we basically had about 3 months to get this application ready. And like anything, there might have been some hiccups with that, trying to get information out so you knew or know what the student is required to do, and you have a better understanding of that application, all of those things. But for this current year, 24-25, we have basically about 1,600 students who have applied for financial aid for this school year. Last year, 23-24, when that application was launched, we ended up with about 500 students who applied. And I like sharing this picture because it speaks to what we are trying to do under the tuition equity law, which is thinking about equity. And as you can see, our governor right in the center, one of the things that I love about this governor is she loves to have public relations events centered or focused around things that are happening. And it has given us an opportunity to highlight major events under our state financial aid programs. So that MASFA application will be available once the FAFSA is completely launched by the Department of Education, the federal department. We will have the MASFA application as well. Right now, we are in sort of a trial testing period where applications are being processed, but the developers of our MASFA application must commit to making any final last minute changes for our application before it goes live. And in every way, this MASFA application mimics the FAFSA application. It is an electronic application. It's online only. There is no paper application available for this. And the students are able to go into our MassAid system, into a student portal to begin their application. It is available in English and Spanish, so every question and instructions are provided in 2 different languages. we are exploring whether or not we can offer this in additional languages, but for now, it is English and Spanish. And we just encourage students, family members who are helping, and guidance counselors as well, to make sure that they read questions very carefully. What we have realized is sometimes there's a misinterpretation, or a student might skip different sections or what have you. And when that happens, that certainly results in an incomplete application. But we do make contact with every student to let them know if their MEFA application was received and if it requires any additional support. So look forward to some additional workshops on that, where we'll spend a lot of time. And in partnering with MEFA, we have a number of things on tap to get through the MEFA application. In fact, anything that we do with FAFSA includes MEFA. So I think that might be a nice way to sort of talk through that. When the student completes that MEFA application, at the end, they must sign it. And there is an e-signature that we prefer, but the student can opt for the paper signature. And if so, they'd have to download that, sign it, and submit it back to the office, either uploading, or they can send it by email, scanned by email. Fax is available, but faxes are almost going out of date now. But there are different options for the student to get that signature page back to us. And that has been one of the major things that we've had to follow up with students on. So enough about the application process. Let's talk about affordability, and how is the Department of Higher Education / Commonwealth of Massachusetts
And Clantha, can
making,
I just ask you one
yes,
question before we move on?
sure.
Someone asked if we happen to know how many out of the 1,600 eligible students, how many out of the 1,600 are eligible to receive state aid? That was the question.
I had information on that a few weeks ago, and it was about 2/3. I can get an update on that. And the ones who are not eligible, and by eligible, we mean that that student's application resulted in a student aid index. In 23-24, it was the EFC. So if the application results in a student aid index, that student then can go on and be considered for state financial aid. In some cases, they will qualify for a mass grant, or in other cases, they would qualify for benefits under free community college, or many of the other programs that we will talk about a little bit later. As you know, these students are not considered Pell eligible, but if the SAI that they receive puts them in that range, then we do consider them for mass grant. I think earlier in the year, when someone asked that, it was close to 900 students who were eligible. And the other thing is, initially in 23-24, we were doing 100% verification, and found that that kind of slowed down the process. So we wanted to release this information to the colleges right away, and without verification, with the understanding that as they review the application, if something doesn't look right, much like the FAFSA process, the institution should connect with the student for additional information, or they can come back to our office and we can track down different things. So, Julie, I think I'll try to get an updated answer to that question and provide that later, or at future workshops,
That's great.
like the one we have tomorrow. Okay.
Thank you.
Are there other questions before we move on?
Just a question about the documentation on file. If you could say that, reiterate that. Yeah.
Okay. So students are required to complete an affidavit attesting to the fact that they meet certain standards. And we can share a copy of that affidavit with you. It is really on our website. If you look at tuition equity law, just put that in the search at the DHE website, which is www.mass.edu. just put in tuition equity on the search. It will take you to a landing page, and there is a link to the affidavit. That affidavit has to be collected at the college that the student will attend, either public or private. And so our students are able to benefit from state financial aid at either independent or public institutions. But that is the documentation that we refer to. Okay.
Thank you.
So if we move on to the good stuff, affordability. And this is what excites me, having spent decades at the financial aid office. I'm not going to date myself, but it's been many. So if we look at affordability, I love this chart because it shows where Massachusetts has been in the last just 3 years, starting with fiscal year 23, when we got money that year, just about $175 million. We thought that that was great. And just this past year, that then moved up to well over $300 million. And for this current fiscal year, we are just under $400 million. And that is outstanding and amazing for Massachusetts. So it shows the investment in state financial aid and where the Commonwealth is headed. And it's just, if you've been in financial aid at the college level and within our agency, it's like we never thought we'd get to this day, but it has allowed the Department of Higher Education or Massachusetts in general to attack the access and affordability issues. And we're going to move on and chat about that a little bit. But and in just a couple of years, we've added over $200 million to state financial aid, when in the past, we never had 150 million, right? So the buzzword this year has been free community college. And I like to say that we implemented free community college fully in the 24-25 academic year, because we did launch in 23-24 free community college through the Mass Reconnect program for students age 25 and over. And if you remember the chart that I showed early on where it says outreach to non-traditional age college students, this is what I mean under the Mass Reconnect program. So free community college, as we know it to be, exists under or is funded under two major programs, Mass Reconnect and Mass Educate. And what that simply means is that there are specific line items that the legislature funds for free community college. So if you look at Mass Reconnect, the line item is something like 1596-24, could be 2414 or something like that. So when the budget is passed or when there's a House budget or Senate budget, first thing that we do is go to the individual line items that supports student financial aid to see where they are, so we can start looking hopeful and planning for the next academic year. Mass Educate then supports students of all ages, and under both Mass Reconnect and Mass Educate, income is not a factor. So what we guarantee is sufficient aid to cover that student's cost of attendance. And I think for counselors, it's just good to know that there is free community college. The details probably aren't as specific, but when a student gets an award notice from a community college, it may reflect an award that says Mass Reconnect, or it may say Mass Educate. Just understand that those are programs that are funded to promote free community college. So under Mass Educate, which is the larger of the two, it is considered the Commonwealth's free community college grant program. And as my slide says, it's designed to provide financial assistance to full and part-time undergraduate students who are enrolled in an approved program at a community college. It's a last dollar scholarship. I'm sorry, last dollar grant, which means that as the colleges are looking to make sure that a student will have sufficient resources to meet the cost of tuition and fees, they will look at that after they've applied, let's say, programs like the student's Pell Grant, if they are eligible, or a Mass Grant, or any other state or federal grant aid that the student qualifies first. And so, as an example, if a student's tuition cost, and I'm just going to throw out a number, is $7,000, and if the Pell Grant is $3,000 and Mass Grant is $1,000, then that Mass Educate would be equal to $3,000 to make certain that they have sufficient funds. And students are able to enroll in a certificate or associate's degree program at the community colleges under the free community college program. Mass Reconnect, again, designed to support full and part-time undergraduate students, but the student has to be age 25 or over at the start of the academic semester. So someone who starts in January, let's say they did not go to school in September, but they start in January. When the school is reviewing their FAFSA or MAFSA data to determine which program that they're eligible for, they certainly will look at the age and determine which program that they will award to that student to meet their cost of tuition and fees. And again, it's still last dollar, and they'll just look at what that student, I like to say what that student brings in with them because of a Pell Grant or the Mass Grant. And these guidelines for Mass Educate and Reconnect are very similar, with the exception of the age factor. Here's another picture that I wanted to share that talks about the promotion of the free community college. And you see the governor in the center there. She's flanked by her lieutenant governor, secretary of ed, and the commissioner of higher ed. And then on the opposite side are the legislators who were very key in getting this program. Representatives Comerford and Senator Spilka. And then we have a couple of students at the table too. So this was a major event that happened. I think this was maybe late September and I believe it might have been at Mass Bay Community College that we had this, but I think pictures are worth 1,000 words. So I just thought I'd share that with you today as well. So if we go back and look at free community college, the student must complete the FAFSA or the MAFA. It is awarded as a last dollar grant and awarded after all other non-loan aid is provided. It targets free tuition and fees, the student's cost for tuition and fees, and full or part-time. But for part-time students, a minimum of 6 credits is required. And under free community college, there is a book and supply allowance up to $1,200. And there's an additional allowance of $1,200 that's awarded to students who meet certain income threshold. And I would say to understand that it's mainly Pell Grant eligible students. So students have an opportunity under the free community college program on the Mass Educate component to get a $1,200 book allowance, much like the book allowance that's provided under Mass Reconnect, but there is an additional allowance for other related educational expenses that can be awarded up to $1,200. And the institutions are awarding these funds to students. In fact, I will say that the Department of Higher Education allocates funds under Mass Reconnect and Mass Educate to the 15 community colleges. And they then take that money and award it to students as they're packaging financial aid to meet their educational costs. But the focus has been on tuition and fees and the book allowance. And also, as I'm chatting this, I took a glimpse of myself, and my camera is a little wacky these days. I come out a little fuzzy, so I do apologize for that. I meant to state that a little earlier. Julie, I will pause to see if there are any questions on free community college before going on.
Yes. Um, well, these are about a few different things, but they're still about what
Okay,
we already talked about, so I'll ask them.
okay,
Um,
sure.
is state aid from the MEFA beholden to satisfactory academic progress the same way federal aid is?
Yes, the answer is yes. Satisfactory academic progress is an eligibility criteria under all state financial aid programs. In fact, we maintain that to be aligned with federal financial aid so that, and that's always been the policy, so that our financial aid officers aren't looking at one standard for federal aid and another for state aid. But satisfactory academic progress has been a requirement for students. Well, gee, since it's been around. Okay.
And then just another overarching question, is state aid available for private institutions as well as public? And is it available if students want to take it to another state?
Okay. The only program that is portable, well, there are a couple of programs that are portable, and that is the foster child grant, which we will talk about later. If a student has been under the care of DCF and are pursuing a college career, they can receive up to $6,000 from the foster child grant program and take that anywhere in the country. That's very similar to the Christian Herter Scholarship, which is also portable to any college in the country. Mass Grant is portable, but only to states that we have reciprocity with. And about a decade ago, there were multiple states, but now we only have reciprocity with Pennsylvania, Vermont, and Washington, D.C. And the reason for the restriction is that those states, other states that we share reciprocity with, decided that they wanted their state aid to remain internal to institutions in that state. So once that happens, then of course we come off the list. With reciprocity under a program like Mass Grant, Massachusetts far benefited from that than other states because students come here to go to college. You know, we have a wealth of fine institutions, public and private. And so it was about a 4-to-1 ratio of how much aid we brought in from other states for those students. But so there are only 3 programs that are portable with restrictions. What was the other part of that question, Julie? You're on mute. Okay, yeah. Are you coming off mute or you're
Oh, you can, yeah, you know what? I'm going to clarify the next question and we'll ask it
okay?
later. So you can keep going.
Okay,
Thank
all
you.
right. Okay, sounds good. So I'm going to continue on and continuing with the phase of talking about free and affordable college. Of course, we have opportunities at community colleges, which we just talked about under free community college. But what are the opportunities for students at 4-year colleges in the state? And this is 4-year public colleges. Mass Grant Plus, and this is a program that you've probably heard a little bit about. It's been in the news in the last couple of weeks as the University of Massachusetts has been launching their promise programs to students, but tied to Mass Grant Plus. It is another state program that funds tuition and fees at our public institutions for low-income Pell eligible students. And it also provides a $1,200 book allowance available at our 9 state universities and all of the UMass campuses. So again, it operates as a last dollar scholarship, but provides students with that opportunity. And this is a program that we were able to increase the value as our financial aid appropriations have increased over the year. For Mass Grant Plus, again, last dollar, so get used to that word. It probably doesn't mean much to the student as long as they know that they're getting financial aid, but for the financial aid administrators, they know that in awarding these funds, they are considering other grant aid first to make sure that these funds are available to students. And the good part about that is that in the equation, when a campus looks at a student's award for these programs, you're looking at the cost of tuition fees minus other non-loan aid, and that equals the Mass Grant Plus award. They're not looking at tuition fee costs minus the student aid index, right? So that has been moved out of the equation. But the institutions have adopted or adjusted to that measure. And this program supports full-time Pell eligible students as well as part-time students. And again, 6 credits is required for those students. For the Mass Grant Plus, we highly encourage students to understand and know the institution's FAFSA deadline or the MASFA deadline. The state may publish a deadline, but usually that is a little later than the college's deadline. In fact, this year in the appropriation language, our deadline for certain programs was listed as August 1, which doesn't mean that that is the same deadline that the institutions will have for packaging their students. So, but if the students meet the financial aid deadline that is published by the institution, they would have the better chance of getting a full package. And by all means, you want that student to adhere to any deadline that the state publishes. And as you look at the FAFSA and MASFA, we always begin with a May 1st deadline. That might shift if the legislature approves a later deadline, or in the case of what happened last year with the FAFSA, we moved that May 1st deadline for the FAFSA and MASFA to July 1 initially. And then when the legislative budget was out, that had changed to August 1. And again, students who met that institution's deadline, which could have been March 15th or April 1, were already in the game because they had submitted their applications earlier. We're hoping that there will not be any delay with the FAFSA this year. I know on the MASFA side, we did not have the delays. We were able to process those fairly quickly as long as we got correct information from the student. I'm going to share with you one other program that helps to make tuition and fees affordable for our students at our public 4-year campuses. And this is another version or an extension of Mass Grant Plus, and we actually call it the Mass Grant Plus Expansion Program. And this program supports tuition and fees for non-Pell eligible students. So Pell eligible students are getting Mass Grant Plus, but non-Pell eligible students are getting assistance from the program that we call Mass Grant Plus Expansion. And it is available at all public 4-year institutions, and which includes the UMass campuses. But what do these students get? Last dollar assistance, but it provides only half of the student's tuition and fee costs. So here's the difference. If you're Pell eligible, then you are awarded this money in consideration of other non-loan aid at 100% of your tuition and fee cost, also with the book allowance. If you are a non-Pell eligible student who meets a certain income threshold, and we cap that currently at a student aid index that's around 15,000, then you are eligible for up to half of your tuition and fee costs, which is pretty substantial if you look at half of tuition at, let's say, University of Massachusetts Amherst campus. And as I mentioned, you have heard recently the UMass campuses have reached out with their commitment to students, working along with the Mass Grant Plus program to make this offer to students. And again, we encourage students to complete the FAFSA or MASFA as early as they can. So Julie, I'm going to pause here before moving on. I'm sure there might be some questions.
Yes. Okay. So if someone has an SAI of 100,000, but Oh, okay, but doesn't have a degree, they can still attend free. Yes, so I answered behind the scenes that
Okay, okay.
um, I know I get this question a lot, and you probably do too,
Mhm,
Clantha,
mhm.
that this program is for everyone. There's that confusion because they have to file the FAFSA or the MASFA,
Right,
but SAI is not considered. Um,
right. For now, are you saying
Sorry, we're talking
master?
about Mass Educate here. So,
Oh, yes, for free committee, right. Income is not a factor, and with that comment, I could have said income or SAI is not a factor on the Mass Educate. One thing that I will mention is you will have probably a Pell eligible student who might get a small award under Mass Educate, and that's because that student is getting Pell Grant, which right now it could be up to what about almost $7,400, and they may also get a Mass Grant. So their need, excuse me, to cover their tuition fees is a lot less. But the student who comes from that much, much higher income with no non-loan grant aid may need the whole thing. And so, yes, they're getting free tuition and fees. So, but that's what happens under a free tuition and fee program. And the reason we require the FAFSA or MASFA is it helps the department to analyze data, make projections so that we know what we need to request for the cost of administering a free community college program. And it is an easy platform for institutions to award the student because they're not having to do something separate for students who say, well, I'm here and I'm not going to complete the FAFSA. Give me my free community college. No, you got to complete that because you are aligned and you're in their system and they could easily award you. Okay.
all right, so you can keep going, and yep, I have a couple of
Okay.
overarching ones we can talk about at the end. So,
Okay, sounds really good. Okay. So one of the things that I wanted to mention, in addition to the programs that we just covered, which provides free community college or free tuition and fees at our public institutions, there are a number of programs that continue to be funded under state financial aid. And many of these you know, but I just wanted to highlight a few of those and go into details on some of these. Mass Grant, full-time students, you know about that. That's the one program that my office will provide information to students on. When we get that FAFSA, and many students aren't aware that the state's getting a copy of their FAFSA application. And so when we communicate with them, sometimes it's confusing. Well, my college just awarded me, financial aid that may not include Mass Grant, but we are attempting to let that student know that we've received their application and either they're eligible for Mass Grant or not. Mass Grant is a centralized financial aid program, which means that the state awards the student and notifies the student, and the student simply takes that award to any institution of their choice, public and private, which was another part of the question, Julie, as I remembered, someone asked, are students who attend the independent private colleges eligible for uh, state financial aid? And many of these programs are, but a lot are geared to public. In fact, on this page here, I'll just point out Mass Grant is public and private. The High Demand Scholarship, public and private. The ECE, Early Childhood Educators, Paraprofessional, and Gilbert Grant, you could be enrolled at a public or private institution. But programs like Cash Grant, the In-Demand Scholarship, and the tuition waivers are all at the public institutions.
oh, that's
So I'm
great.
going to, yes, going to move on and talk about a few of these before we end today's discussion. So Mass Grant. Mass Grant is the Commonwealth's primary need-based grant program. It's a program that we've supported for decades. And as I mentioned, when a student completes that FAFSA, the state's going to get a copy of it as long as that student has indicated that they are a Massachusetts resident. If a student makes a mistake and puts ME instead of MA, we will not get that student's application until they correct that. But one of the first things that we will do is see if that student qualifies for Mass Grant, notify that student, but at the same time, the institutions are aware of any student who qualifies for a Mass grant because they can access our Mass Aid portal and go in and take a look at their students. So that's something when a student gets an award letter entering freshman, you may see that the institution has populated that with Mass grant. It may have a disclaimer, but they can do that because they know that that student is eligible. Either they know that that student is Pell Grant eligible, which qualifies them for Mass grant, or they've reviewed that and confirmed that in their web portal. And this is something that I mentioned earlier. The Mass grant is portable to students who attend colleges in Pennsylvania, Vermont, and Washington, D.C. So public and private colleges in Massachusetts and the three states or district that we have reciprocity with. One thing, student must be Pell eligible. Now, what you might learn if you're really into the weeds of financial aid, you will understand that there are some students who have been designated Pell eligible and they have very high student aid indexes. Well, we understand that there's about 1,200 floating around this year. And those students, if they have that Pell flag and are getting Pell, then they are getting a Mass grant, but it is a very smaller Mass grant. So that's where you might see some, questionable, well, the student has a high income or high SAI, are they eligible? What the institutions and our office looks for is that Pell eligible flag. Those awards range from $500 to $3,000 annually. So as you know, those extremely high SAIs are getting that minimum award of 500. And students who get Mass grant can get it for 4 years, 4 years, 8 semesters. If they tap out, then they're done with that, but they will be able to access other state financial aid programs. And I'm mentioning here the May 1st deadline, which is published on the FAFSA. The state has to provide to the U.S. Department of Ed the state deadline, so that gets printed with the instructions for every state. And we've always had a May 1st deadline, but it might be revised due to certain circumstances. We revised it under COVID and again revised that this past year based on the challenges that we had with the FAFSA. Another program that I mentioned, the Adopted and Foster Fee Assistance Program, or at least I talked about the grant, but this is the Fee Assistance Program, which is awarded to students who attend public colleges and universities in Massachusetts. And this is a full tuition and fee program. So here again, when I mentioned last dollar grant under Mass Grant Plus or Mass Educate, this will be one of the programs that the institution would put into the pool of financial aid for a student. And for this program, students who qualify under this program would not get any money from Mass Educate because their tuition and fees are already free. The student does require documentation from the Department of Children and Families, and we've implemented an upload of documentation, but in some cases, the student can provide their documentation directly to the colleges. So we are working with the Department of Children and Families to make that documentation process easier, getting the opportunity to upload that information into the system. And the only thing about the DCF program is that it provides a system up to the point that the student turns age 26. So if the student will turn age 26 during an academic year, they're funded for the full year. And this program continues to grow. 550 students in 2010, up to 830 this past year. But my staff tells me that we're already at capacity this year. So that means to me that there are more than 800 students who are eligible. And we may have to ask for a supplemental to award these students. But this is considered an entitlement program. So if we need to reach out, I'm sure the legislature will respond appropriately. Here's a program that is strictly for students attending our private institutions, and this is the Gilbert Matching Grant Program. So it does support, years ago, this program was designed to support access and choice. And choice meaning a student wanted to go to a non-public institution, but the costs were higher. So every state in the union had something that was called a tuition equity program. And the Gilbert Grant is sort of Massachusetts' answer to that. This is money that's allocated to the colleges, to the institutions, and the institutions get to award that to the students. It has remained at a fairly low level from $200 to $2,500 a year, and the recipients must meet all eligibility requirements, which include enrolling full-time. So for programs like Mass Grant and the Gilbert Grant, it is a full-time status for the students. And on average, we are providing about $22 million for Gilbert grants, and that's supporting anywhere between, on average, about 8,500 to 9,000 students. So a student who applies to Harvard, BCBU, Simmons, Springfield College, or what have you, might see that they're getting a Gilbert grant. And my favorite program that I always want to mention to this group is the Christian Herder Scholarship, completely portable to any college around the continental USA. It meets up to half of the students' unmet need, and it is a 4-year commitment to students, on average up to about $20,000 a year. But with college costs, it looks like that $20,000 a year might be increased in the next year, so long as our budget can support that. But for the Christian Herder Scholarship Program, it does require that the institution nominate students, and the students have to complete a kind of wonky online application because they have to list information along with references, uploading letters of recommendations, transcripts, that sort of thing. And if students get through that process and are selected, it's a wonderful program. And as I didn't put it here, but students for this program are selected due to demonstrating their ability to overcome adversity. It could be health related, or it could be financial related, or other circumstances that, let's say, the typical student does not have to go through. And for many of our Herder students, you would not know that they're going through these things unless it's very clear. So the 25 application will kick off in December. And I wanted to mention that so you can look for this information in your mailbox, and hopefully you will be encouraged to submit nominations. And don't give up if you submit them every year and your students are not selected. If you want to know, well, what are you doing wrong? It's not that you're doing anything wrong. It's just that this is a very competitive program. But if you have specific questions about your nominees, you can reach out to our office. So with that, I'm going to pause for questions. We have pretty much about maybe 8 minutes or so to do that.
This is
And
perfect. Yeah.
okay, great.
So I'm going to go with the hardest first. How about
Okay,
that?
okay, sounds good.
So will Massachusetts, this is about the MASFA form and
Okay.
students who aren't eligible to file the FAFSA. Will Massachusetts guarantee confidentiality of undocumented students' affidavits from disclosure to feds?
Yeah, that's a great question, and we are seeing it more now than ever. And the way I will answer that is, at this time, the Department of Higher Education is not sharing information for students who complete the MASFA to anyone. The only way that that information will be shared is if our legal counsel decides that the agency has no other option. And at this point, we're not seeing that at all. So students should feel comfortable completing that application. We're not giving up anybody in this state. This is Massachusetts is a blue state, so we do maintain confidentiality. I think there would have to be some mandate that forces not only Massachusetts, but I think there's about 8 or 9 other states, maybe more, who are also awarding undocumented students. You take the larger ones, California, Texas, and some others, but I don't see that happening at all. And if that were to happen, our legal counsel would guide us through that. There are a lot of stakeholders that are working with us on the MEFA application, and that is the one thing that they put in front of us, the confidentiality. So right now, zipped.
That's great. And kind of a related question from another person. Will there be sort of extra marketing about the MASFA this year, given everything?
Definitely extra marketing. We're going to do everything we did last year, which included a number of workshops with counselors and other college access stakeholders, financial aid administrators, but we have a director of communications who's working on a number of, we're working, we have a weekly meeting that Julie and I are part of with all of these communication strategies. And we have a contract with a couple of marketing agencies, but our goal is to really beef that up, because one of the things that has come to the department is that this word is not getting out. And how do we get that word out? And our focus is going to be on communities where we know that there's a potential of a high concentration of undocumented students. We don't know that. You may know that more than us, but we are told that there's at least 3,000 undocumented seniors in the senior class this year. So we want to get at that. We want to increase that number, and we're going to do everything that we possibly can, working with our stakeholder partners and our institutions to encourage awareness.
That's great. And I have a couple more.
Mhm.
This is a question about early college.
Okay.
And so the question is there definitive language from the state about early college students' pre-matriculation credits being considered for SAP, for satisfactory academic progress? It seems that financial aid
Mhm.
officers are sometimes unsure. So this person is asking if there is some
Right,
definitive
right.
language. Yeah.
That's a great question. I've not seen any definitive language come out of the department, and I personally think that institutions might treat that differently, because some early college programs are in partnership between institutions and a student. What I can say is that a student who is participating in early college cannot receive state financial aid because they're not eligible to complete the FAFSA. Does it stand to reason that their performance should not be counted? Perhaps, but I can take that back to our academic unit and general counsel, because I think that question needs to be answered. And it is something that nowhere will you find that the financial aid guidelines address that, but that is probably something that the department should issue guidance on. So we'll hopefully get to that and have that released at some point in the very near future.
That's great. And then someone is asking, is there a tool available on the DHE website for students to sort of answer a set of questions to see what state aid they might be eligible for? Is there anything like that?
There is. We have a cost calculator that was introduced, I think maybe a couple years ago, and it is being updated. But if a student goes there and um, all I can tell you is you have to go to mass.edu under financial aid, search for cost calculator. And it's very similar to, or somewhat similar to, calculators that you might find on the College Board's website or whatever, but it's focused on state financial aid. So depending on how a student answers questions or whatever, it may say, oh, you might qualify for mass grant. Oh, or you've listed a community college, you will qualify for free community college or what have you. Yes, And that program, I don't know if the changes have been introduced yet or under the test phases, but yes, we do have a tool and it's being enhanced. I should say it that way. I should have the exact website for that, but Julie, maybe I can add that to the PowerPoint if you're going to share that later with the group,
Great.
and so I can add a slide with that with some context.
Oh,
I'll do
that's
the
great.
tuition equity, the cost calculator tool, and a couple of other links for programs.
Oh, thank you.
Okay.
That's terrific. And just two more. Are there any supports besides the ones we've covered for students who are unhoused or who might have been at any point in their high school career?
What I can tell you is that we have a pilot program that offers assistance for housing that exists between community colleges and our four-year state universities. And it also provides some stipend to students, but a broad program, no. However, I know that students are able to answer or respond to those questions on the FAFSA, but that may be the next area. And we are doing a lot of work in that area, but we've not specifically created a program for students. It is something that we hope to. In fact, right now our focus has been on tuition and fees, and we are reminded every day that that's not the only cost that students have. Room and board, other transportation, even childcare, those are things. So we hope to grow the programs to begin to address other related educational expenses, and that certainly would include housing. I don't know if the department will end up with a specific program, but it could be wrapped into one of the existing programs.
Thank you. And I think
Okay.
the last question, and we are on perfect time here,
Oh, great.
is there a specific application for the in-demand scholarship?
No, the in-demand scholarship is available to public college students, four-year students, and it is allocated, those funds are allocated to the institutions. And get this program supports undergraduate and graduate students. The award can be up to the cost of tuition. I should have included a slide on that, but it's a wonderful program that was created just a year ago. The legislature funded that program at $23 million. This year's only at 10. However, the student has to connect with their financial aid office to see if they qualify because it's awarded directly by the college. There is an application for the high demand scholarship that goes to public and private. And this year we are awarding probably about $33 million for that program. We got some federal funds for that. So there was a pretty extensive application process for that. And next year there will be an online application for that will release probably in the late spring for the 25-26 academic year. Okay.
That's terrific. Well, Clantha, thank you so much. And I want
You're
to
quite
thank all of the
welcome.
participants. Those were some really great questions. And I'll share that tomorrow morning at the same time, 8:30 a.m., Clantha will be back with us with a panel. And we have another webinar that is going to be talking more about how you can counsel your students through the fact that there is all this great new money,
Right.
but also there's so much of it, and how can you help them, choose the path that's right for them. So I just welcome you back if you'd like to come to that, or you can sign up for it, and if you can't attend, then you of course will receive the recording for that one as well. So Clantha, we're going to keep you busy.
I look forward to it. So hopefully I'll see some of you again tomorrow.
Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great day.
Bye.